My dear friends, tonight we embark on a deeper journey together, immersing ourselves in the heart of a sacred story from God's Word. A story perhaps small in its scale, yet profound in its gentle wisdom. We travel back in time, to ancient Israel, to a moment by the flowing waters of the Jordan River, where the prophet Elisha, a man deeply connected to the divine, encounters a very human problem: a lost tool, an iron axe head. Picture, if you will, the sun-dappled banks of the river, the earnest labor of a community of faith, and the quiet miracle that unfolds, a testament to God's care for even the smallest details of our lives. This is the story of Elisha's floating axe head, a curious, calm story of lost and found tools, a story that whispers of divine attentiveness and the gentle power of faith. Imagine, for a prolonged moment, walking those ancient paths, feeling the warmth of that sun, hearing the murmur of voices filled with devotion and purpose. It is in these simple moments that God often reveals Himself most clearly. So, before we delve deeper into this expansive narrative, if these stories from Scripture resonate with your spirit and bring you comfort, I warmly invite you to like this reflection and subscribe to our channel. It truly helps share these messages of hope, faith, and peace with others. And as we prepare our hearts for this journey, please feel free to share in the comments below a prayer intention you may be holding, a favorite Bible verse that speaks to you about God's care or provision, or simply where you are listening from tonight. It's a blessing to know we are connected in this sacred space of reflection. Now, let the cares of the day gently fade away. Find your quiet space, perhaps say a silent prayer, breathe deeply, and let us open our hearts and minds to the wisdom, comfort, and unfolding wonder of God's Word in this ancient narrative. You find yourself now in the land of Israel, a land etched with the footsteps of patriarchs and prophets, a land promised and cherished, yet often troubled. It is the era of the divided kingdom, a time of spiritual ebb and flow, where faithfulness to Yahweh contended with the allure of surrounding pagan cultures. Yet, even in such times, pockets of deep devotion existed, sanctuaries of spiritual light. You are drawn towards one such haven, the community of the sons of the prophets. This term, sons of the prophets, doesn't necessarily mean they are literal offspring of prophets, but rather that they are disciples, apprentices in the school of divine mysteries, men who have chosen a life dedicated to hearing God's voice, studying His law, and serving His purposes in a world often deaf to His call. Their present dwelling, you observe, is perhaps situated near a place like Jericho, the ancient city of palms, or maybe Bethel, a place whose name means house of God, yet had also known periods of idolatry. Wherever it is, their current abode is modest, almost stark in its simplicity. Imagine a cluster of small, connected rooms, or perhaps a collection of humble huts, constructed from the materials readily available: sun-dried mud bricks, rough stones gathered from the fields, and timbers that might have already served a previous purpose. The roofs, you notice, are flat, made of layers of branches, reeds, and packed earth, needing constant maintenance, especially during the rainy season. Inside, the light is often dim, filtering through small openings that serve as windows. The furnishings are sparse: woven mats for sleeping, a few clay pots for water and food, perhaps a worn wooden chest holding precious scrolls of the law and the prophets. There is an austerity here that speaks not of deprivation, but of chosen detachment from worldly clutter, a deliberate emptying to make space for spiritual fullness. The simplicity, you reflect, is often a fertile ground for profound spiritual encounters. When the distractions of material comfort are minimized, the soul can more easily attune itself to the subtle whispers of the divine. The community is growing. Word has spread of the wisdom and spiritual power of Elisha, their leader, and men from various walks of life are drawn to this school of faith. Perhaps some are young, filled with idealistic zeal. Others might be older, seeking a deeper meaning after years spent in worldly pursuits. Some might be Levites, already dedicated to religious service, but seeking a more intimate connection with God. This expansion is a sign of God's blessing, a testament to the hunger for spiritual truth in the land. Yet, it also brings with it a very real, very human challenge. Their dwelling has become too small. You can almost feel the gentle elbowing for space. the careful choreography required to move within the crowded rooms. You hear the soft murmur of prayers, finding it hard to ascend from a space so tightly packed with bodies. The intimacy of their fellowship, while cherished, is now strained by the sheer lack of physical room to breathe, to study, to simply be. It's a beautiful problem, in a way, this problem of abundance, of too many souls seeking God in one place. It reminds you that growth, even spiritual growth, often necessitates change, expansion, and a willingness to step out into the unknown. Life within this community, you perceive, is structured around a rhythm of prayer, study, work, and fellowship. The days likely begin before dawn, with prayers offered in the stillness of the early morning, voices rising in unison, chanting psalms that speak of God's faithfulness, His mercy, His power. Then there would be periods of study, poring over the sacred texts, perhaps with Elisha himself expounding on the deeper meanings, sharing insights gleaned from his own close walk with God. You imagine them sitting at his feet, much like disciples with their master, their faces earnest, their hearts open to receive. They would learn not only the letter of the law, but its spirit, its application to their lives and to the life of the nation. They would also be trained in the prophetic arts, how to discern God's voice, how to speak His word with courage and compassion, how to intercede for the people. This was not an academic exercise, it was a formation of the whole person, a shaping of character to become vessels of God's truth. Such deep, intentional spiritual formation, you ponder, is a timeless need for those who wish to serve God effectively. Their life is not solely contemplative, however. They also engage in manual labor, perhaps tending a small garden to provide for their sustenance, or crafting simple items. This balance of prayer, study, and work is a hallmark of healthy spiritual communities. It keeps them grounded, it fosters humility, and it teaches them the dignity of all labor done for the glory of God. And then there is the fellowship, the deep bond of brotherhood that unites them. They share their meals, their joys, their sorrows. They encourage one another. They hold each other accountable. In a world that often valued power and status, this community offered a different model, one of mutual love, service, and shared commitment to a higher calling. This reminds you that the Christian journey is not meant to be a solo endeavor, but a pilgrimage undertaken in the company of fellow believers, supporting and strengthening one another along the way. Their spiritual leader, Elisha, is a figure of immense significance. You recall his story, his calling. He was a prosperous farmer, plowing with 12 yoke of oxen, when Elijah, guided by God, cast his mantle upon him, a symbolic invitation to succeed him. Elisha's response was immediate and decisive. He slaughtered his oxen, cooked their meat with the wood of his plowing equipment, and gave it to the people, a clear sign of his complete break with his past life and his total commitment to his new calling. He then followed Elijah, ministering to him until Elijah was taken up to heaven. And as Elijah ascended, Elisha cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." He then picked up Elijah's fallen mantle, and with it, he struck the waters of the Jordan, which parted, just as they had for Elijah. This act confirmed that Elijah's spirit, indeed a double portion as he had requested, now rested upon Elisha. Elisha's ministry, like Elijah's, was marked by powerful miracles, purifying a poisoned spring at Jericho, multiplying a widow's oil to save her from debt, raising the Shunammite woman's son from the dead, healing Naaman the Syrian of leprosy. These were not displays of personal power, but rather demonstrations of God's compassion, His provision, His authority over sickness, death, and even the political powers of the day. Yet, despite these grand manifestations of divine power, when you observe Elisha with his disciples, you see a man of profound humility and gentleness. He is not one to lord his spiritual gifts over others. He is approachable, patient, deeply invested in the spiritual growth of each man under his care. He is a true spiritual father, guiding them not through coercion, but through example, through love, through the quiet authority that comes from a life lived in deep communion with God. You see him listening more than he speaks, observing, discerning the needs of his community. His presence is a source of comfort, of stability, of inspiration. It's a beautiful illustration of how true spiritual authority is always rooted in servanthood and love. Such leaders do not draw attention to themselves, but point others towards God. The growing discomfort in their cramped quarters finally leads the sons of the prophets to approach Elisha. You can imagine the scene, a delegation of them, perhaps after much discussion and prayer among themselves, comes before him. There's no hint of rebellion or discontent in their demeanor. They approach him with deep respect, as children would a beloved father. One of them, chosen as their spokesman, articulates their need. "Behold now," he begins, his voice conveying both their predicament and their deference. "The place where we dwell with you is too small for us." The Hebrew phrase is literally "the place is too narrow for us before you." It's a polite, almost apologetic way of stating the problem. They don't just present the problem, they come with a well-thought-out solution, a testament to their initiative and practical wisdom. "Please, let us go to the Jordan," the spokesman continues, "and let each man take from there a beam, and let us make us a place there where we may dwell." Their plan is simple, yet resourceful. The Jordan Valley, with its more abundant tree growth compared to the often barren hills, offers the raw materials they need. Each man will contribute his labor, felling a tree and preparing a beam. This communal effort will not only provide them with a new dwelling, but will also strengthen their bonds of fellowship. They are not asking Elisha to perform a miracle to provide them with a new home. They are ready to work for it, to invest their own sweat and effort. This proactive spirit, this willingness to partner with God by using the abilities and resources He has given them, is a mark of mature faith. It reminds you that faith is not passive resignation, but an active engagement with God and the world He has created. Elisha listens attentively, his gaze kind, his heart attuned to their need. He is not a leader who dictates, but one who collaborates. He sees the reasonableness of their request, the wisdom in their plan. His response is concise and affirming. Go. With this single word, He empowers them. He validates their initiative. He gives them His blessing to proceed. There is no hesitation, no lengthy deliberation. He trusts their judgment. He supports their desire for a better space to live and serve God. This act of delegation, of trusting others with responsibility, is a crucial aspect of wise leadership. But then, a further request is made, one that speaks volumes about their deep affection and reverence for Elisha. One of them, perhaps feeling a surge of courage or simply unable to imagine undertaking such an important endeavor without their master's presence, speaks up. "Please," he implores, "be content, I pray you, and go with your servants." The King James Version says, "Be content, I pray thee, and go with thy servants." The plea is earnest, heartfelt. They don't just want His permission, they want His companionship, His guidance, His spiritual presence to sanctify their work. His presence would be a source of encouragement, a visible reminder of God's blessing upon their efforts. It's a beautiful expression of their desire not just for a new building, but for a home built in an atmosphere of holiness and divine favor. You reflect on how vital the presence of godly mentors and leaders is in the life of any community of faith. Their wisdom, their prayers, their very example can elevate and transform any endeavor. Elisha, a man whose heart was ever tender towards the needs and desires of his spiritual children, considers their plea. Perhaps he sees in their eyes a longing that goes beyond mere practicality. He understands their need for His reassuring presence, and so, with characteristic grace, he replies, "I will go." No conditions, no reluctance, just a simple, willing assent. His decision to accompany them, to share in their journey and their labor, even if primarily in a supportive capacity, underscores his servant heart. He is not too important, too busy, too spiritually elevated to be involved in the mundane, practical aspects of their lives. This teaches you that true spirituality is not detached from the realities of everyday life, but fully engaged with them, sanctifying them through love and service. And so, the plan is set in motion. A wave of quiet excitement and purposeful activity sweeps through the community. Preparations for the journey to the Jordan begin. These are not grand, elaborate preparations. Their lives are marked by simplicity, and their resources are meager. Each man gathers his few essential belongings, a sturdy cloak to protect against the cool desert nights and the morning chill by the river, a waterskin to carry precious water, perhaps a small pouch containing a bit of dried fruit, roasted grain, or a piece of flatbread for sustenance on the way. Their tools, as we've noted, are few and precious. Some may have a well-worn knife, a simple adze, or perhaps a shared saw. The focus is not on material comfort, but on the task ahead, on the promise of a new beginning. You see them checking their sandals, ensuring they are sturdy enough for the journey. There's a quiet hum of conversation, of planning, of shared anticipation. This journey represents more than just a change of location. It is a pilgrimage of faith, a collective step towards a future they believe God is orchestrating for them. You are reminded that God often calls His people to leave their familiar surroundings, to venture into new territories, trusting in His guidance and provision. The day of departure arrives. Imagine them setting out, a small but determined band, with Elisha, their revered prophet, walking in their midst. His presence is a visible anchor, a source of quiet confidence for the group. As they leave their old, cramped quarters, there might be a fleeting glance backward, a moment of reflection on the blessings and lessons learned there. But their faces are turned forward, towards the Jordan, towards the future. The journey itself becomes a profound experience, a walking meditation. If their previous dwelling was in the hill country of Samaria, as is likely, their path would lead them eastward and downward, descending from the cooler, terraced highlands into the warmer, more arid Jordan Valley. You walk with them, in spirit, feeling the texture of the ancient land beneath your feet. The path is dusty, sometimes rocky. You see the distinctive flora of the region, thorny shrubs, hardy grasses, perhaps the occasional resilient terebinth or oak tree offering a moment's shade. The sun climbs in the sky, its warmth intensifying, and you appreciate the coolness of the water from your waterskin. You observe the landscape changing as you descend. The hills become more barren in places, sculpted by wind and occasional rain into starkly beautiful forms. You might pass by small, isolated villages where life moves at an unhurried pace, dictated by the seasons and the rhythms of agriculture. Shepherds tend their flocks of sheep and goats on the sparse hillsides, their silhouettes etched against the vast expanse of the sky. The air is filled with the sounds of the journey, the rhythmic crunch of sandals on the earth, the occasional call of a bird, the murmur of hushed conversations among the prophets, perhaps sharing a scripture, a word of encouragement, or simply enjoying the quiet companionship. Elisha, as he walks with them, is not just a silent observer. You can imagine him using the journey itself as a teaching opportunity. Perhaps he points to a wildflower blooming in an unexpected place, speaking of God's ability to bring beauty even from barrenness. Perhaps he recounts stories of their ancestors who traversed these same lands: Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Joshua, weaving a thread of continuity between their own journey and the grand narrative of God's dealings with His people. He might speak of the challenges and temptations of the wilderness and the importance of unwavering faith and obedience. His words, like cool water to thirsty souls, would refresh their spirits and strengthen their resolve. This reminds you that God's lessons are not confined to sacred buildings or formal teachings. They are often found in the midst of our everyday experiences, in the journeys we undertake, if only we have a heart to perceive them. The Jordan River, their destination, holds a profound spiritual resonance for every Israelite. It is not merely a geographical feature, it is a theological landmark. You recall its significance. It was the final barrier the Israelites had to cross to enter the Promised Land, a crossing made possible by God's miraculous intervention. When the waters parted before the Ark of the Covenant, that event was a powerful symbol of God's faithfulness in fulfilling His promises, of His power to make a way where there seems to be no way. The Jordan was also the scene of Elijah's dramatic parting of the waters before his ascension, and Elisha's own repetition of that miracle, confirming his divine calling. Later, John the Baptist would preach repentance and baptize multitudes in its waters, preparing the way for the Messiah. The very name Jordan means descender, reflecting its course from the mountains of the north down to the Dead Sea. As you in the company of prophets draw nearer to its banks, you can feel a shift in the atmosphere, a sense of approaching a place touched by divine history, a place where heaven has repeatedly intersected with earth. This awareness would undoubtedly deepen the significance of their endeavor. They are not just building a physical shelter, they are establishing a spiritual outpost on sacred ground. Finally, after what might have been a journey of 1 or 2 days, depending on their starting point and pace, they arrive at the Jordan. The landscape here is markedly different from the arid hills. The river, a ribbon of life, winds its way through the valley, its banks fringed with a denser vegetation. You see willows, tamarisks, poplars, and perhaps even reeds and rushes growing thickly near the water's edge. The air is cooler, more humid, carrying the scent of damp earth and green foliage. The sound of the flowing water is a constant, soothing murmur, a counterpoint to the stillness of the surrounding wilderness. It is a place of stark contrasts, the life-giving river set against the backdrop of the often barren valley. This contrast itself might speak to the prophets of God's ability to bring forth life and sustenance even in the most unpromising environments. They begin to scout for a suitable location to build their new dwelling. They need a place with a good supply of timber, relatively level ground, and perhaps some protection from the elements. Elisha is with them, his experienced eye surveying the terrain, his wisdom guiding their choice. You see them walking along the riverbank, their conversation focused and purposeful. There's a sense of unity, of shared vision. Each man feels a sense of ownership, of participation in this important undertaking. Eventually, they find a spot that seems ideal. Perhaps it's a clearing among the trees, or a gently sloping bank that offers both access to the water and a solid foundation for their structure. The selection of the site is a moment of quiet satisfaction, of hope taking tangible form. They can almost envision their new home rising there, a place where they can continue their life of prayer, study, and fellowship, unhampered by the constraints of their previous dwelling. This act of choosing a place, of dedicating it to God's service, is itself a prayer, an act of faith. You reflect on how often in Scripture, places become sacred through encounters with God, or through their dedication to His purposes. This spot by the Jordan is about to become such a place for this community. Now, as they prepare for the arduous task of felling trees and constructing their new home, the narrative subtly, yet significantly, zooms in on the tools they will use. In an age before mechanized logging and mass-produced hardware, tools were immensely valuable possessions. An iron axe head, in particular, was a costly and essential item. Iron was still a relatively expensive metal, and the process of forging it into a durable, effective tool required specialized skill. For the sons of the prophets, who lived a communal life characterized by poverty and simplicity, owning such a tool might have been a luxury. It's likely they had only a few axes among them, carefully maintained and shared. You can picture them now, laying out their modest collection of tools. Perhaps there are a few worn but serviceable axes, their wooden handles smoothed by long use. There might be some adzes for shaping the timbers, and perhaps a primitive saw or two. Each tool is treated with respect, with an awareness of its value. And then, the specific detail emerges that one of the men is using a borrowed axe. But as one was felling a beam, the axe head fell into the water. We'll come to the falling part later, but the fact that it was borrowed is highlighted. Consider the man who borrowed this axe. Perhaps he was one of the newer members of the community, or one who did not possess an axe of his own. He would have asked a fellow prophet, or perhaps someone from a nearby village, if he could borrow this essential tool. The lender, knowing the importance of the building project, would have generously agreed, but with the implicit understanding that the axe was to be cared for and returned. The borrower would feel the weight of this responsibility acutely. Every swing of the axe would be accompanied by a conscious effort to be careful, to preserve the tool. Losing it or damaging it would be a source of great shame and financial burden. It would mean having to replace it, which would be a significant hardship for someone of limited means. More than that, it would be a breach of trust, a letting down of the person who had shown him kindness. This detail of the borrowed axe adds a poignant human element to the story. It grounds the narrative in the everyday realities of life, the small anxieties and responsibilities that shape our human experience. It also underscores the themes of stewardship, community, and interdependence. These men relied on each other, shared what they had, and understood the importance of honoring their commitments. The borrowed axe is not just an object, it is a symbol of relationship, of trust, of mutual support. It reminds you that our possessions, whether owned or borrowed, come with a responsibility to use them wisely and care for them diligently. And it sets the stage for the crisis that is about to unfold, a crisis that will reveal not only the man's distress, but also God's compassionate attentiveness to the seemingly small troubles of his children. As the sun begins to climb towards its zenith, casting shorter shadows, the men make their final preparations to begin their labor. They select the trees they will fell, perhaps offering a silent prayer for safety and strength. The air is filled with a sense of anticipation, of purposeful energy. Elisha watches them, his presence a quiet benediction upon their work. He knows that this physical labor, undertaken in faith and for the glory of God, is as sacred as the prayers offered in the sanctuary. He understands that God is not confined to temples or holy days, but is present in the midst of life, in the sweat and toil of ordinary people seeking to do His will. You stand with them on the threshold of this endeavor, the scent of the river, the damp earth, and the slightly metallic tang of the air filling your senses. The gentle murmur of the Jordan seems to whisper tales of ancient miracles and divine encounters, creating an atmosphere pregnant with spiritual possibility. Even in this seemingly mundane scene of men preparing to chop wood, you feel a profound sense underscore of holiness, of God's imminent presence. It is often in the ordinary, you reflect, in the common tasks and daily struggles, that God chooses to reveal His extraordinary grace. The journey has brought them here, faith has sustained them, and community surrounds them. Now, as the first axe is about to swing, you hold your breath, knowing that this ordinary day is about to become a testament to the extraordinary care of a loving God. The stage is meticulously set, every detail imbued with meaning, preparing your heart for the gentle yet powerful miracle that is about to unfold. A miracle born from a simple, human mistake and a compassionate, divine response. The very ground beneath your feet feels sacred, charged with the faith of these humble men and the ever-present grace of their God. The decision made, the site chosen, the prophet Elisha's reassuring presence a quiet balm upon their collective spirit. The sons of the prophets now dedicate themselves to the vigorous labor before them. You are there, an unseen observer, breathing in the unique atmosphere of the Jordan riverbank. The sun, now ascending towards its midday throne, casts a brilliant, almost dazzling light upon the scene, its warmth becoming more insistent. A tangible presence on your skin, yet a gentle, intermittent breeze, carrying the cool breath of the river and the subtle fragrance of damp earth and unseen wildflowers, offers moments of welcome relief. It rustles softly through the leaves of the willows, poplars, and tamarisks that cling to the river's edge, creating a soothing, whispering counterpoint to the sounds of their toil. There's an almost palpable aura of sacred industry here, a profound sense that this physical exertion, this sweat and strain, is an act of worship, a cooperative venture with the divine to bring forth something new and good. The initial sounds of preparation, the quiet discussions, the measuring, the selecting of trees now give way to a symphony of effortful sounds. The dominant motif is the rhythmic, percussive thud of iron axe heads biting into resilient wood. Thwack, thwack, thwack. Each blow echoes briefly in the comparative stillness of the Jordan Valley, a sound that speaks of human endeavor, of progress being painstakingly carved out of the raw material of creation. It is a sound that is both ancient and timeless, the sound of building, of shaping, of transforming nature to meet human need. You hear, too, the rasp of simple saws, if they possess such tools, laboriously cutting through thicker trunks. There are the sharper cracks as branches are lopped off, and the heavier, groaning creak of a tree as it begins to lean, to surrender, finally falling with a mighty crash that momentarily silences the other sounds, followed by a chorus of shouts, perhaps of warning or of satisfaction. You observe the men, their forms silhouetted against the bright sky or dappled by the shifting patterns of sunlight, filtering through the leaves. Their simple, homespun robes, practical for their daily life of study and prayer, are now likely girded up, tucked into their belts to allow for freer movement. Their arms, accustomed perhaps more to holding scrolls than swinging axes, are nonetheless strong and determined. Their faces, already showing the flush of exertion, are set in concentration. Sweat glistens on their foreheads, trickles down their temples, carving little rivulets through the dust that has settled on their skin. You see the strain in their shoulders, the tightening of muscles in their backs as they swing the heavy axes or heave at the fallen logs. Imagine the scene in even richer detail. The air is thick with the scent of raw, wounded wood, a clean, sharp, slightly sweet aroma of sap and cellulose, a fragrance that speaks of life laid down to serve a new purpose. The scent mingles with the earthy smell of the disturbed soil, the faint, fishy tang of the river, and the pervasive, dry scent of the semi-arid wilderness that stretches beyond the narrow ribbon of green lining the Jordan. Tiny chips of wood, pale against the darker earth, fly in all directions. Like confetti celebrating their labor, sawdust, fine and fragrant, coats their clothes and mingles with their sweat. The men communicate with a practical brevity, their words often punctuated by grunts of effort. A little more to the left, one might call out as they guide the fall of a tree, "Ready, heave." Another might shout as they work together to drag a massive log towards the designated building site. There is a profound beauty in this scene of communal labor. These are not hired hands, working for a wage. They are brothers in faith, working together with a shared vision, a shared hope. Their movements, though perhaps not always perfectly synchronized, possess a certain harmony, born of their common purpose and their mutual reliance. They help each other, encourage each other, share the burden of the heaviest tasks. You see one man pause to wipe the sweat from his eyes with the back of his hand, then immediately resume his work. Another stops for a moment to take a deep draught of water from a shared water skin, the coolness a welcome shock to his system. This shared toil, you reflect, is forging something more enduring than wooden beams. It is forging character, deepening relationships, building a community that is strong not just in spirit, but in its practical ability to support and sustain itself. It's a powerful reminder that faith is not merely an internal state. It is meant to be expressed in action, in service, in tangible contributions to the well-being of others. The kingdom of God, you ponder, is built not only through prayer and proclamation, but also through the sweat and sacrifice of ordinary people working together for a common good. And amidst this hive of dedicated activity, your attention is drawn, almost magnetically, to the man we spoke of earlier, the one wielding the borrowed axe. You watch him with a particular interest, knowing the small tragedy that is about to befall him. He is working with intense focus, perhaps a little apart from the others, intent on felling his designated tree. You can see the earnestness etched on his face, the desire to do his part, to contribute significantly to this vital project. The axe he uses, you notice, seems well cared for, its iron head sharpened to a keen edge, its wooden handle smooth and sturdy, though perhaps not perfectly fitted. He swings it with a steady rhythm, blow after blow, each one a testament to his diligence. He is mindful, no doubt, of the preciousness of the tool, the trust that was placed in him when it was lent. The thought of returning it damaged, or worse, not returning it at all, would be a heavy weight on his conscience, a constant, low hum of anxiety beneath his concentration. Then the moment arrives swift, unexpected, and utterly dismaying. He brings the axe down in a powerful, well-aimed arc. There's the familiar sound of the blade striking wood, but it is immediately followed by an unfamiliar, jarring sensation. The connection between the heavy iron axe head and the wooden helve, perhaps weakened by previous use, or by a hidden flaw in the wood, or simply by the forceful impact, suddenly gives way. With a shocking abruptness, the metal head, freed from its mooring, becomes a projectile. It flies off the handle, propelled by the momentum of his swing. For a fraction of a second, it seems to hang in the air, a dark, menacing shape against the bright backdrop of the sky over the river. Then, with a trajectory dictated by physics and misfortune, it sails outwards, over the muddy bank, and with a distinct, heart-stopping plosh, it vanishes beneath the swirling, opaque waters of the Jordan. A beat of stunned silence descends, more profound than any previous pause in their labor. The man stands utterly still, as if turned to stone, his hands still reflexively gripping the now absurdly light, headless wooden handle. His eyes, wide with a mixture of disbelief and dawning horror, are fixed on the ripples that are already beginning to dissipate on the surface of the river, the only visible evidence of where his precious, borrowed axe head has disappeared. The other prophets, their senses attuned to the rhythms of the work, instantly notice the cessation of his chopping and the unusual sound. They turn, their expressions initially curious, then quickly shifting to concern as they see the man's frozen posture and the look on his face. Then the dam of his composure breaks. A cry, raw and laden with anguish, erupts from him, tearing through the previously industrious atmosphere. "Ah, my lord," he exclaims, or alas, master, the words a torrent of grief, dismay, and perhaps a touch of panic. His voice trembles. It was borrowed. This last part of his cry is the key, the very heart of his despair. It's not just the practical difficulty of losing an essential tool, though that is certainly a part of it. It's the crushing weight of having lost something that was not his own, something entrusted to his care. You can almost step inside his mind, feel the turmoil raging within him. One moment, he was a productive member of the team, contributing his strength and skill to their shared goal. The next, he is the cause of a significant problem, a man who has failed in his responsibility. The value of the axe head flashes before his mind. How many days' wages would it take to replace it? Where would he even find such a sum, living as he did in a community of voluntary poverty? But even more painful than the financial implications is the thought of the lender. How could he face the person who had generously lent him the tool? How could he explain his carelessness? The shame of it feels like a physical weight, pressing down on him, stealing his breath. His initial shock gives way to a sickening wave of regret and anxiety. The river, which moments before had been a symbol of life and provision, now seems like a greedy monster, having swallowed up not just a piece of iron, but his peace, his honor. The other sons of the prophets quickly gather round him, their faces reflecting a mixture of sympathy and shared concern. They understand. They know the value of tools. They know the sacredness of a trust. Some might pat his shoulder awkwardly, offering mumbled words of commiseration. "Don't worry, brother," one might say, though his words would ring hollow even to himself. For what else could they do? Another might suggest searching for it, but a quick glance at the flowing, murky water would reveal the futility of such an idea. The Jordan is not a clear, shallow pond. Its currents are deceptive, its bed likely littered with rocks, branches, and silt. Finding a relatively small, dark object like an axe head in such conditions would be like searching for a needle in a vast, watery haystack. They are lumbermen for a day, not salvage divers. This moment of loss, so vividly portrayed, serves as a powerful reminder of our own human frailty and the unpredictable nature of life. How often do we, too, find ourselves in situations where something precious is suddenly lost, not necessarily through malicious intent, but through a simple accident, a moment of inattention, or circumstances beyond our control. It could be a material object, yes, but it could also be something far more significant, a carefully guarded reputation, a cherished relationship, a sense of purpose, a moment of spiritual clarity. And like this man, we too can be overwhelmed by feelings of regret, guilt, and helplessness. We cry out, "Alas, it was entrusted to me, and I have lost it." The weight of perceived failure can be a heavy burden to bear. All activity on the riverbank has now ceased. The rhythmic chopping, the cheerful calls, all are replaced by a heavy, anxious silence, broken only by the soft murmur of the river that seems to mock their predicament. The building project, so hopefully begun, is now overshadowed by this unfortunate incident. The loss of even one axe head is a blow to their resources, but the emotional impact on the man who lost it, and by extension on the whole community, is perhaps even greater. And now, all eyes, filled with a mixture of apprehension and a sliver of desperate hope, turn towards Elisha. The prophet has, no doubt, observed the entire incident. He heard the man's cry. He sees the gathered group, the distress on their faces. He understands the full weight of the situation, not just the practical loss, but the emotional and relational turmoil it has caused. How will this great man of God, who has faced down kings, called down fire from heaven in the spirit of Elijah, and brought life back to the dead, respond to this seemingly small, personal crisis of a lost, borrowed axe head? Will he consider it beneath his notice, a trivial distraction from the more important spiritual matters at hand? Will he offer a stern lecture on carelessness? Or will his response reveal the true depth of God's compassion? a compassion that extends even to the mundane anxieties and material losses of his children. Elisha moves towards the epicenter of the little drama. You observe his approach. There is no rush, no agitation in his movements. His face, as always, seems to carry an aura of profound peace, a calmness that is not of this world. He doesn't immediately scold or even offer advice. He simply comes near, his presence itself a quiet offering of support. He allows the man to fully articulate his distress, to voice his lament. This simple act of listening, of being present without judgment, is itself a powerful ministry. It validates the man's feelings. It acknowledges his pain. So often, you reflect, what people need most in moments of crisis is not a quick fix or a dismissive platitude, but a compassionate ear, a heart that is willing to enter into their sorrow. The man's anguished words, "Alas, Master, for it was borrowed," hang heavy in the air, a poignant summary of his predicament. He looks at Elisha with eyes that are a mixture of shame, fear, and a desperate, almost childlike hope. He has appealed to his master, his spiritual guide. Is there anything Elisha can do? Is there any wisdom he can offer? Is there any comfort to be found? The situation seems irredeemable by human standards. The axe head is gone, swallowed by the indifferent river. This poignant scene underscores a profound theological truth. The God whom Elisha serves is not a remote, disinterested deity, concerned only with grand cosmic events. He is a God who is intimately involved in the lives of individuals, a God who cares about their anxieties, their losses, their responsibilities. The story challenges any notion of a God who is too big or too holy to be bothered with the small stuff of our lives. Indeed, it suggests that it is precisely in these small, everyday moments of need that God often chooses to reveal his tender mercy and his surprising power. The sense of community, though strained by the incident, is also evident. The other prophets do not abandon their distressed brother. They stand with him, sharing his concern, even if they are powerless to help. This is the ideal of a true spiritual family, a place where burdens are shared, where failures are met with grace, and where individuals are supported in their times of need. It reminds you of the Apostle Paul's exhortation to bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. This little group of prophets, in their shared distress and their turning to Elisha, embodies this principle. The lost axe head itself becomes a potent symbol. It represents more than just its material value. It symbolizes lost potential, the work it could have done, the beams it could have shaped. It symbolizes broken trust, at least in the mind of the man who borrowed it. It symbolizes the frustration of plans gone awry, of good intentions leading to unfortunate outcomes. And for this community, so reliant on limited resources, its loss is a genuine setback to their important project. The hopeful momentum of their building enterprise has hit a significant, disheartening snag. The stillness by the riverbank is profound. The sun continues its relentless journey across the sky, seemingly indifferent to the small human drama unfolding below. The Jordan River continues its timeless journey to the Dead Sea, carrying with it the lost axe head, a tiny piece of iron that has caused so much turmoil. In this charged atmosphere, you feel a heightened sense of anticipation. Something is about to happen. The crisis has reached its peak. The human options seem exhausted. It is a moment ripe for divine intervention, a moment where the veil between the natural and the supernatural might just become transparent. Elisha's calm, unperturbed presence in the face of the man's profound distress is a beacon of hope. It suggests that he is not limited by the same perceptions of impossibility that grip the others. His silence is not one of helplessness, but perhaps of quiet consultation with the one who holds all things, even lost axe heads, in his hands. And so, you wait, alongside the sons of the prophets, your heart leaning forward, eager to witness how God's grace will meet this very human need. The story is poised on a knife edge between despair and hope, between irretrievable loss and miraculous recovery. The ripples on the Jordan's surface, marking the spot where the borrowed axe head plunged into the depths, have long since smoothed away, absorbed by the river's ceaseless flow. Yet, the ripples of distress continue to resonate within the small, tight-knit community of prophets. The man who lost the precious tool stands as a figure of profound dejection. the now useless wooden handle clutched in his hand like a relic of his misfortune. His earlier cry, "Alas, Master, for it was borrowed," still echoes in the hushed atmosphere, a poignant melody of honesty, responsibility, and deep-seated anxiety. Around him, his brothers in faith gather, their faces etched with a mixture of sympathy for his plight and a shared sense of helplessness. The vibrant energy of their building project, so hopefully initiated just moments before, has been abruptly extinguished, replaced by a heavy pall of concern, and into this charged blow of human vulnerability and material loss. The serene and steadfast figure of Elisha, the man of God, moves with quiet purpose. You observe Elisha with keen attention, your spirit sensing the subtle shift he brings to the scene. His demeanor is a stark and comforting contrast to the palpable agitation that surrounds him. There is no trace of panic in his eyes, no shadow of frustration or impatience that might be expected from a leader whose important project has been disrupted. Instead, you perceive in him a profound stillness, an almost tangible aura of quiet compassion that seems to emanate from his very being, subtly beginning to calm the turbulent emotional waters around him. He has heard the man's desperate cry. He has witnessed his profound despair. He does not rush in with immediate, perhaps superficial, solutions or easy platitudes designed to dismiss the man's grief. No, he simply allows the weight of the moment to be fully acknowledged, validating the reality of the loss and the man's genuine sorrow. This, you reflect, is a hallmark of true spiritual maturity, the ability to be fully present with another's pain, to offer a ministry of presence that holds space for human frailty without judgment. Such empathy is often the first and most crucial step in any journey towards healing and restoration. Then, after a moment of shared silence that allows the man's distress to be fully expressed and witnessed, Elisha speaks. His voice, when it finally breaks the quiet, is not loud or theatrical, as one might expect from a prophet known for commanding miracles. Instead, it is calm, gentle, measured, yet imbued with an undeniable undercurrent of quiet authority and profound empathy. He addresses the distraught man directly, his question disarmingly simple, remarkably practical, almost surprisingly mundane, especially when contrasted with the grandeur of his other recorded miracles, such as the parting of this very Jordan River. Where did it fall? He asks. Just those 4 words. Where did it fall? But in their simplicity, they carry a universe of meaning. There's no condemnation in his tone, no hint of "how could you have been so careless?" or "why weren't you paying more attention?" There's no attempt to minimize the loss with a dismissive, "Don't worry your head about it, it's just an axe head." Instead, Elisha asks a question that seeks specific, concrete information. It is a question that communicates genuine interest, deep concern, and, perhaps most importantly, implies the possibility of a positive outcome, a potential for action. This seemingly straightforward inquiry, you realize, is a profound statement in itself. It tells you, and it tells the distressed man, that God, speaking and acting through his prophet, is intimately interested in the precise details of our human predicaments. He is not a God who deals only in broad strokes, in abstract principles. He wants to know where it fell, the exact geographical coordinate of our loss, the specific locus of our pain and anxiety. This meticulous attention to detail is one of the most comforting aspects of his divine care. It reassures you that no problem is too small, no concern too insignificant to escape his notice or his capacity to intervene. He meets us not in some vague, ethereal realm, but right where we are, in the messy, concrete realities of our daily lives. The man, who has been lost in the depths of his own misery, is perhaps startled by the directness and the unexpected practicality of Elisha's question. He might have braced himself for a lecture on stewardship, or perhaps a theological discourse on accepting loss as part of God's inscrutable will. Instead, he is asked for a location, a simple pointer. A flicker of something indefinable. Is it surprise, or could it be the faintest, most fragile glimmer of nascent hope flickers across his desolate features? He lifts his head, his eyes still shadowed with sorrow, and looks towards the flowing river. His gaze searches, scanning the bank, trying to recall the exact spot, the precise trajectory of the errant axe head. Then, with a gesture that is likely heavy with the memory of his misfortune, he points. The scriptures simply state, "And he showed him the place." You can imagine him, his voice still thick with unshed tears, perhaps saying, "There, Master. It was right there, just by that gnarled root of the old tamarisk tree." Or it splashed into the water just beyond that patch of trembling reeds. He indicates the specific area where the precious, borrowed iron tool disappeared from sight, swallowed by the relentless current of the Jordan. To an indifferent observer, that particular patch of water would look no different from any other stretch of the river, its surface reflecting the sky, its waters flowing placidly onward, seemingly oblivious to the small human drama it has just consumed. Yet, for this man, that spot is now indelibly marked in his memory as a place of profound loss, a watery tomb for his borrowed tool, and with it, his peace of mind and his sense underscore of honor. Elisha's gaze follows the man's pointing finger. He looks intently at the spot indicated. He assesses the scene with his experienced eyes, the width of the river here, the likely depth of the water, the strength of the current, the nature of the riverbank, perhaps muddy and slippery. From a purely human standpoint, the situation remains utterly hopeless. An iron axe head, being significantly denser than water, does not float. It sinks quickly and irretrievably, especially in a flowing river with a potentially silted or debris-strewn bed. To even attempt to find it by groping in the murky water would be a fool's errand, dangerous and almost certainly doomed to failure. But Elisha, you remember, does not operate solely within the confines of human perspectives or the observed laws of nature. His life is a testament to a different reality, a reality governed by his unwavering faith in the omnipotent, compassionate God he serves. He has been a conduit for God's power in situations far more daunting than this. He has purified fatally poisoned waters with a handful of salt. He has made a destitute widow's small jar of oil fill countless empty vessels. He has restored life to the Shunammite's son. While causing an iron axe head to float might seem a less spectacular miracle, compared to raising the dead, it is, in its own way, just as profound a defiance of the natural order, just as clear a demonstration of God's sovereignty over the created world. Perhaps, you muse, God often chooses to manifest his power in these smaller, more personal miracles to tenderly remind us that his loving care extends to every facet of our existence, encompassing not just our life and death crises, but also our everyday anxieties and material concerns. He is the God of the mundane as well as the God of the magnificent. Having identified the precise location of the loss, Elisha now acts, and his action, once again, is characterized by a striking simplicity, an almost underwhelming ordinariness, which nonetheless is imbued with profound spiritual significance and quiet authority. He doesn't engage in elaborate, attention-grabbing rituals. There are no flamboyant gestures, no incantations whispered to the spirits of the river. He doesn't call down fire from heaven, as his mentor Elijah was known to do, nor does he command the Jordan River to cease its flow or yield up its stolen treasure. Instead, the scripture tells us, he cut down a stick and cast it in there. You watch as Elisha, perhaps after a moment of silent communion with God, turns his attention to the surrounding vegetation. He scans the trees and shrubs lining the riverbank. Then, with a decisive movement, he selects a branch or a small sapling. He might use a knife he carries, or perhaps he simply breaks off a piece of wood of a suitable length and thickness. The biblical account is sparse in its details here, simply stating he cut down a stick. The specific species of tree from which the stick is taken is not mentioned, nor is its size or shape described in any detail. This lack of specificity is itself significant. It powerfully underscores the fact that the stick possesses no inherent magical properties, no intrinsic power to counteract gravity or alter the density of iron. It is an ordinary piece of wood, indistinguishable from countless other branches along the riverbank. This very ordinariness serves to magnify the divine power that is about to be displayed, ensuring that no one can attribute the miracle to the instrument rather than to the God who employs it. Having procured the stick, Elisha approaches the edge of the water. Then, with a deliberate, unhurried gesture, he casts it into the river, aiming for the very spot where the man had indicated the axe head had fallen. Imagine the stick landing lightly on the surface of the water, perhaps twirling for a moment in an eddy before being gently caught by the current. What could this possibly achieve? How could a mere piece of wood, itself subject to the whims of the river's flow, exert any influence on a heavy iron axe head lying inert and unseen on the murky riverbed below? From a purely rational, scientific viewpoint, Elisha's action is perplexing, even nonsensical. It appears to be a futile, almost symbolic gesture, with no logical connection to the problem at hand. Yet, this act of casting the stick into the water is a moment freighted with symbolic resonance and theological meaning. It is, above all, an act of profound faith. Elisha is not relying on human ingenuity, on clever retrieval methods, or on his own physical strength. He is placing his complete trust in God. The stick, in and of itself, is powerless to make iron float. It is merely an instrument, a physical point of focus for the divine energy that is about to be unleashed, a visible conduit for an invisible power. It is a tangible expression of Elisha's unwavering conviction that God can and will intervene in this situation. You are reminded of so many other instances in the sacred narrative where God chose to use seemingly insignificant or unlikely means to accomplish his mighty purposes. Moses' wooden staff parting the waters of the Red Sea, the sound of ram's horns and human shouts bringing down the formidable walls of Jericho, a young shepherd boy's sling and stone felling a giant warrior, a little boy's meager offering of 5 barley loaves, and to small fish being multiplied to feed a vast multitude. God, it seems, delights in choosing the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, the weak things of the world to shame the strong, so that no human being might boast in his presence. The utter simplicity of the means Elisha employs serves only to highlight the extraordinary greatness of God's power. Elisha's action also speaks eloquently of the critical importance of obedience in the life of faith. It is highly probable that he is acting under a specific, direct prompting from God, following an instruction received in the quiet sanctuary of his spirit. His willingness to obey, even when the instruction might seem strange, illogical, or even counterintuitive, is a crucial prerequisite for the miracle to occur. This provides a powerful lesson for you, and for all who seek to walk with God. True faith is not merely an intellectual assent to God's existence or power. It is a dynamic relationship that involves listening for his voice and being willing to obey his guidance, even when we don't fully understand the reasons behind it, or when the path he indicates seems to defy conventional wisdom. True faith often requires us to step out beyond the comfortable boundaries of our own limited understanding and to trust implicitly in God's infinite wisdom and sovereign purpose. Consider, for a moment, the stark contrast between the raw, unfiltered human anxiety of the man who lost the axe and the serene, focused action of the prophet. The man was overwhelmed with distress, his mind a whirlwind of worst-case scenarios and self-recrimination. Elisha, on the other hand, moves with a calm, deliberate intentionality. He doesn't get swept up in the surrounding emotional turmoil. He simply inquires, where did it fall, identifies the place, and then acts in quiet faith. This contrast vividly illustrates the profound peace and unwavering confidence that can be ours when we learn to entrust our problems, both big and small, to God. While human nature is prone to panic, to fret, to despair when faced with adversity, those who cultivate a deep, abiding relationship with God can learn to operate from a place of serene assurance, rooted in the knowledge of his power, his love, and his faithfulness. The act of throwing the stick into the water also carries a rich symbolic weight that transcends the immediate narrative. Wood, in the symbolic language of Scripture, is often associated with life, with growth, with the means of bearing burdens as in the wood of a yoke or a cross, and sometimes with divine intervention and restoration. While it is important to be cautious about over-interpreting symbolic meanings, there is a discernible sense in which Elisha, by casting the wooden stick into the water, is introducing an element of God's life-giving, order-restoring power into the very place of loss and disorder. The river, in this instance, had become a symbol of devouring loss, having swallowed the heavy iron axe head, which by its nature was destined to sink and remain lost, a symbol of finality, of death to its usefulness, the stick, cast in by the hand of the prophet, a man in communion with God, becomes a conduit for a divine counteraction, a miraculous reversal of natural law. Theologians and spiritual commentators throughout the centuries have pondered this enigmatic act, often seeing in the wood a typological foreshadowing of the wood of the cross of Christ. Just as the stick was the instrument through which the lost axe head was recovered and restored, so the cross is the instrument through which lost humanity, sunk in the depths of sin and despair, is lifted up, redeemed, and restored to fellowship with God. This is indeed a rich and beautiful theological reflection. Yet, even if we set aside such typological interpretations for a moment and consider the story on its most literal level, it speaks with undeniable power of God's astonishing ability to suspend or override the established laws of nature in order to meet the specific needs of His beloved children. Iron is heavy, it sinks in water, that is its inherent nature, a principle established by God Himself in creation. But God is the author of nature, and as such, He is not bound by its laws. He can make iron swim if He so chooses, especially when such a unique act serves to reveal His tender compassion, to bolster wavering faith, to restore what has been tragically lost, and to bring glory to His name. Meanwhile, the other sons of the prophets, who have been watching this entire sequence of events unfold, are now observing with a mixture of heightened curiosity, perhaps a degree of healthy skepticism, and a burgeoning, almost fearful hope. They have been privileged to witness Elisha perform mighty miracles before miracles that often involved grand displays of power or addressed matters of life and death. But this is different. Throwing a common stick into the water, with the apparent intention of retrieving a sunken iron axe head, it defies all known principles of logic and physics. It seems so mundane, so understated. Yet, they also know Elisha. They know the depth of his relationship with Yahweh. They have experienced firsthand the tangible reality of God's power working through him. And they know, from the sacred history of their people, that with God, all things are indeed possible. So they wait, their eyes riveted on the spot where the stick now bobs gently on the water's surface, their hearts perhaps beating a little faster, caught between doubt and dawning expectation. This moment becomes a subtle test of their own faith, a gentle challenge to look beyond the immediately visible, to transcend the purely rational, and to cultivate an expectancy for the unexpected when their God is involved. And what of the man who lost the axe? What is transpiring within his heart and mind? His initial, crushing despair may now be reluctantly yielding to a fragile, almost daring not to believe, ember of hope. He has confessed his loss. He has shown Elisha the place. He has seen the prophet. Take a specific, albeit puzzling, action. Could it truly be possible? Could this terrible, shameful loss somehow be reversed? He is likely holding his breath, his gaze locked on the water, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, fear of disappointment warring with a desperate longing for a miracle. His prayers, perhaps previously incoherent cries of distress, may now be forming into more focused, though unspoken, pleas for divine intervention. His entire being is concentrated on that single spot in the river, on that small piece of wood floating innocuously on the surface, and on the unseen, yet palpable, connection between the prophet Elisha and the God of all power and mercy. Elisha himself, having cast the stick into the water, now likely stands in an attitude of quiet prayer and serene expectation. He has performed his part in this divine drama, the part of listening, of discerning, of acting in faith-filled obedience. Now, the outcome rests entirely in God's hands. There is no frantic pacing, no anxious incantations, no dramatic pronouncements to manipulate the elements. Just a simple act of faith, followed by a moment of profound, prayerful waiting. This, too, is a deeply instructive lesson for all who would walk with God. Miracles are not always, or even usually, accompanied by thunderous displays and dramatic fanfare. Sometimes, God chooses to work His wonders in the stillness, in the quietness, in the gentle response to a simple, humble act of faith. Elisha's remarkable calmness in this pivotal moment is a powerful testament to his deep, unshakable trust in God. He has released the situation, with all its attendant anxieties, completely into God's loving and capable hands. confident that God will honor his servant's faith and meet the pressing need of the distressed man, in his own time and his own way. This intimate scene, unfolding on the sun-dappled banks of the ancient Jordan, becomes a vivid and enduring tableau of faith in action. It powerfully demonstrates that God's solutions to our human problems are not always, or even often, what we might expect or devise with our limited human logic. His methods may seem unconventional, even paradoxical or foolish, when judged by purely worldly standards. But God's ways, as the prophet Isaiah reminds us, are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He can, and often does, use the most unlikely and seemingly insignificant means to achieve his glorious purposes, to demonstrate his sovereign power, and to reveal the boundless depths of his love and compassion. The crucial element, as Elisha so beautifully models for us, is to cultivate a heart that is attentive to his guidance, a will that is ready to obey in simple faith, and a spirit that trusts implicitly in his ability to do what we, in our own strength, cannot. The stick floats gently on the current. The river continues its timeless journey. The assembled prophets watch, their breath held in suspense. The man who lost the axe waits, his heart suspended between hope and despair. The very air around them seems thick with unspoken prayers, with a tension that is almost palpable, a sense of imminence. What will happen next? Will the stick simply drift away, a poignant symbol of a well-intentioned but ultimately futile gesture? Or will this ordinary piece of wood, consecrated by an act of prophetic faith, become the unlikely instrument of an extraordinary miracle, a tangible testament to the God who cares enough about the anxieties of one humble servant to make heavy iron swim? The narrative has skillfully brought us to the very precipice of the miraculous, a sacred moment where the veil between the natural and the supernatural is poised to be drawn back, revealing the loving, attentive, and astonishing power of the God of Israel. The utter simplicity of Elisha's preceding action only serves to magnify the impending wonder, ensuring that all glory and praise will be directed not to the prophet, nor to the stick, but to God alone, the source of all true miracles. The air by the Jordan River, already charged with a potent mixture of human anxiety and nascent hope, now crackles with an almost electric sense of impending wonder. Every eye is riveted, every breath held, every heart poised on the precipice of the unknown. The small, ordinary stick, cast by Elisha's hand, floats innocuously upon the gently swirling surface of the water, directly above the spot where the borrowed iron axe head had so tragically plunged into the depths. The prophet who had suffered the loss stands transfixed, his earlier despair now yielding to a fragile, almost unbearable hope. His companions, the other sons of the prophets, form a silent, expectant semicircle, their faces a study in mixed emotions, a lingering skepticism perhaps, battling with a growing sense of awe and a desperate longing to witness the power of their God. Elisha alone remains a beacon of serene composure, his posture one of quiet, unwavering expectation, his faith a tangible force field that seems to hold the very elements in suspense. The sun, climbing steadily towards its zenith, bathes the scene in its brilliant, impartial light, its rays fracturing into 1,000 diamonds on the restless surface of the river, as if nature itself is adorning the stage for a divine performance. You are there, an unseen witness, your own spirit caught up in this sacred, suspended moment, a breath held between human desperation and the imminent unveiling of divine intervention. Then the miracle unfolds. It begins not with a thunderclap or a dramatic parting of the waters, but with a subtle, almost imperceptible disturbance on the river's surface, directly beneath the floating stick. A few bubbles, perhaps, rising from the depths like an underwater sigh. Then, a slight discoloration in the murky water, a hint of movement where all was still. And then, slowly, with a grace that defies its very nature, a dark, metallic shape begins to ascend from the unseen riverbed. It is not a playful fish leaping from the water, nor a buoyant piece of driftwood disturbed by the current. No, this is something altogether different, something utterly impossible by every known law of the physical world. The iron axe head, dense, heavy, and by all rights, condemned to remain forever embedded in the mud and silt of the Jordan's depths, is now rising. It moves upwards with a steady, almost ethereal lightness, as if drawn by an invisible thread from above or propelled by an unseen hand from below. It is a silent, majestic defiance of gravity, a quiet refutation of logic, a breathtaking suspension of all human expectation. You watch, completely mesmerized, your own heart caught in your throat, as the axe head, that very instrument of the man's earlier distress, breaks the surface of the water. It bobs there for a moment, a stark, incongruous object of dark, forged iron floating as effortlessly as if it were a dry leaf or a piece of porous pumice stone. The murky river water drips from its smooth, metallic surface, each droplet catching the sunlight and glinting like a liquid diamond, before falling back into the river. The iron, which only moments before had been a symbol of irretrievable loss, of broken trust, of crushing responsibility, now rests placidly, almost peacefully, upon the very water that had swallowed it, a stunning, undeniable testament to the absolute sovereignty of God over His created order. The sacred text describes this astonishing, physics-defying event with a beautiful, almost laconic simplicity that only serves to heighten its miraculous nature. And the iron did swim. The iron did swim. These three simple, unadorned words resonate with a power far beyond their lexical weight. They encapsulate a profound miracle, a direct, personal intervention of God in the established workings of the natural world. There is no attempt at elaborate explanation, no recourse to scientific rationalization or philosophical discourse. The event is presented as a stark, irreducible fact, a divine act that transcends, and indeed lovingly subverts, human understanding. The very laws of physics, those dependable principles that dictate that dense iron invariably sinks in water, have been momentarily, gracefully suspended by the one who authored those laws in the very beginning of time. This is not an act of sorcery or a trick of perception. It is a genuine miracle, an unambiguous act of God that reveals not only His omnipotent power, but also, in this particular, poignant instance, His exquisitely tender compassion. A collective gasp, sharp and involuntary, might escape the lips of the assembled onlookers. It is the sound of astonishment, of disbelief giving way to undeniable reality. The prophet who had lost the axe, his face previously a mask of despair, now finds his eyes widening to their fullest extent, his mouth falling slightly agape. For a moment, he seems unable to process what he is seeing. Then, as the truth of the miracle penetrates his consciousness, his expression transforms. The shadows of grief and anxiety are chased away by a dawning, then overwhelming, radiance of pure, unadulterated joy. The other sons of the prophets, his brethren, stare at the floating iron, their initial skepticism, their polite concern dissolving into a profound, speechless awe. They are witnessing something that shatters all their preconceived notions, all their everyday experience of how the world is supposed to work. They are seeing, with their own eyes, tangible, irrefutable proof that the God they worship, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God proclaimed by their master Elisha, is not constrained by the limitations that bind and define human existence. He can indeed do anything. He can make heavy iron swim as if it were a child's wooden toy. Elisha, his calm demeanor remarkably unchanged by the extraordinary event he has just facilitated, though perhaps a gentle, understanding smile now softens the lines around his eyes, turns his gaze from the floating axe head to the man who had lost it. His voice, when he speaks, is as gentle and practical as it was before. "Take it up to thee," he instructs him simply, or as some translations render it, "lift it out for yourself." The invitation is direct, personal, and wonderfully empowering. The miracle has been performed not as a mere spectacle, not as an abstract display of divine power to impress the masses, but for a very specific, deeply personal, and eminently practical purpose: to restore what was tragically lost, to alleviate the crushing distress of this humble, faithful servant of God. God, through Elisha, has brought the axe head miraculously to the surface. Now, it is incumbent upon the man to reach out, to actively participate in his own restoration, to receive this astonishing and gracious gift. The man, still visibly reeling from the profound shock and overwhelming wonder of what he has just witnessed, needs no second bidding. He moves forward, his steps perhaps a little unsteady, his eyes still locked on the impossibly floating axe head, as if he fears it might vanish as suddenly and inexplicably as it has appeared. He extends his hand, that very same hand which, only a short while ago, had so despairingly clutched the useless, headless wooden handle. Now, with fingers that tremble slightly, not from fear but from an excessive emotion, he reaches down and carefully, reverently, plucks the iron axe head from the surface of the Jordan. It feels solid, undeniably real, reassuringly heavy in his grasp once more, though its weight is now a comfort, not a burden. The cool, damp metal, still glistening with river water, is a tangible, irrefutable confirmation of the miracle. This is no illusion, no fleeting dream conjured by his overwrought imagination. The borrowed axe head, the one he had mourned as lost beyond all hope of recovery, is back in his possession, safe and sound. A tidal wave of profound relief, ineffable gratitude, and overwhelming, liberating joy washes over him, cleansing his soul of all its previous turmoil. The oppressive burden of guilt, the gnawing anxiety about his responsibility, the shame of having failed in his stewardship, all these heavy weights are instantaneously lifted, dissolving like mist in the morning sun. Tears, hot and cleansing, might well up in his eyes and stream unheeded down his dusty cheeks, tears not of sorrow this time, nor of frustration, but of pure, unadulterated, astonished thankfulness. He gazes at the restored axe head in his hand, then lifts his eyes to Elisha, his expression a profound admixture of awe, reverence, and a gratitude too deep for mere words. He might attempt to speak, to stammer out his thanks, but it is likely that words fail him in this moment of such intense, overwhelming emotion. His heart is simply too full, overflowing with a joy that transcends articulation. This singular experience, this deeply personal encounter with the miraculous, compassionate, and restorative power of God will undoubtedly be seared into his memory, a luminous and transformative touchstone for the rest of his earthly days. The other sons of the prophets, having witnessed this incredible act of divine restoration with their own eyes, are also profoundly moved, their initial shock giving way to a chorus of joyful exclamation. They might break into spontaneous expressions of heartfelt praise and reverent wonder. Murmurs of Baruch Hashem, blessed be the name, or God is truly great, or the Lord, He is God, might ripple through the astonished group. This extraordinary event serves as a powerful, undeniable affirmation of their faith, a tangible, unforgettable reminder of the living presence and omnipotent power of the God. They serve under the guidance of their master Elisha. It deepens their conviction that they are indeed following a true prophet of Yahweh, a man through whom God chooses to work wonders both great and small, both public and deeply personal. This shared experience of the miraculous would also serve to forge even deeper bonds of fellowship among them, uniting them in a shared sense of awe, gratitude, and renewed commitment. They have not merely witnessed the recovery of a lost tool, they have beheld a revelation of the compassionate, attentive heart of their God, unveiled in a manner most personal, intimate, and unforgettable. You pause to reflect on the profound and multifaceted significance of this seemingly small, almost incidental miracle. Why, you might ask, would the God of all creation, the sustainer of the cosmos, choose to intervene in such a mundane, everyday matter as a lost iron axe head? Perhaps, you consider, it is precisely because it is such a mundane, relatable matter. This exquisitely simple story serves as a beautiful and enduring illustration that God's divine care and compassionate concern are not reserved exclusively for grand, earth-shattering historical events or for individuals of great worldly status and recognized importance. No, He is intimately, meticulously concerned with the everyday lives, the practical, pressing needs, the deeply felt personal anxieties of ordinary, humble individuals. The man who lost the axe head was not a king arrayed in purple, nor a high priest adorned with sacred vestments. He was, by all accounts, a humble, unassuming member of a prophetic community, likely poor in material possessions and obscure by the world's standards of greatness. Yet, his genuine distress, his heartfelt cry of "Alas, Master," for it was borrowed, mattered profoundly to God. His keen sense of responsibility, his fear of having failed in his stewardship of a borrowed item, resonated deeply within the compassionate heart of his Creator and Heavenly Father. This miracle, therefore, stands as a powerful and comforting antidote to the insidious temptation to believe that God is too busy, too majestic, too distant, or too preoccupied with more important cosmic affairs to be bothered with our seemingly small personal struggles and anxieties. It reassures you, with gentle yet irrefutable power, that He sees your hidden worries. He knows your unspoken needs. He understands your feelings of loss, frustration, and failure, no matter how insignificant or trivial they may seem in the vast sweep of eternity. And He is not only aware, but He is also abundantly able and profoundly willing to intervene, to restore, to make a way where there seems to be absolutely no way. His love is not a remote, abstract theological concept. It is intensely personal, wonderfully practical, and exquisitely attentive to the smallest details of your life. Consider, too, the unique nature of the miracle itself, heavy iron floating as if it were buoyant wood. It is such a gentle, almost whimsical, yet utterly definitive display of God's sovereign power over the entirety of His creation. It is not a destructive miracle, like the calling down of fire from heaven or the unleashing of devastating plagues. It is, rather, a profoundly creative, undeniably restorative miracle. It doesn't just solve the immediate problem. It does so in a way that inspires pure wonder, delightful awe, and a renewed sense of God's limitless capabilities. It serves as a powerful reminder that the God who, in the beginning, spoke the universe into existence and meticulously established its intricate physical laws is not, Himself, bound or constrained by those laws. He is utterly sovereign over them and can, at any moment, alter, suspend, or transcend them according to His divine will and benevolent purpose. This profound truth should fill your heart not with a sense of fear or cosmic insecurity, but with a deep and abiding sense of security, peace, and unshakable hope, knowing that you serve a God for whom absolutely nothing is impossible, a God who can turn situations of utter hopelessness into occasions for rejoicing. The miraculous restoration of the axe head also carries immediate and significant practical implications for the small community of prophets. The vital work of felling timber and constructing their much-needed new dwelling place can now resume without further frustrating delay or disheartening impediment. The essential tool, so crucial for their labor, has been providentially recovered. The man who had lost it is now completely relieved of his crushing burden of guilt and anxiety. He can rejoin his brothers in their shared task, his heart undoubtedly overflowing with renewed zeal, profound gratitude, and a fresh anointing of divine favor. The entire building project, which had been so abruptly cast under a dark shadow of misfortune and potential failure, is now bathed in the warm, life-giving light of God's miraculous provision and undeniable blessing. This extraordinary experience would undoubtedly infuse all their subsequent labor with a deeper, more vibrant sense of God's immediate presence and unwavering blessing. Every swing of that restored axe, every beam shaped and set in place, would henceforth be a potent, tangible reminder of His faithfulness, His power, and His tender care. You might also ponder more deeply the crucial lesson of stewardship that is so subtly, yet powerfully woven into the very fabric of this narrative. The man's acute distress over losing a borrowed axe head serves to highlight, with poignant clarity, the profound importance of taking seriously the responsibility that comes with everything entrusted to our care, whether it be material possessions, unique talents and abilities, precious relationships, or sacred spiritual gifts. His transparent integrity in immediately acknowledging the loss and his deep, palpable concern for making things right are truly commendable and serve as an example for all. And God, in His infinite grace and tender mercy, clearly honors this conscientious heart by miraculously restoring what was lost. This, of course, doesn't imply a divine guarantee that God will always supernaturally restore every material thing we lose through accident or carelessness, but it does strongly suggest that He sees and profoundly values a heart that takes the principle of stewardship seriously, a heart that is faithful in the small things, and it assures us that He is more than able to provide for all our genuine needs, often in ways that we could never anticipate or imagine. It should encourage you, therefore, to be diligent and faithful in managing all that God has entrusted to you, no matter how seemingly small or insignificant and to trust Him implicitly to provide for your needs according to His riches in glory. The story also speaks volumes about the quiet power and indispensable role of authentic intercession and true prophetic ministry within the community of faith. Elisha, as God's chosen and anointed representative, acted as a crucial intermediary, a bridge between human need and divine resource. He heard the man's cry of distress. He undoubtedly sought God's guidance in the quietness of his own spirit, as was his established custom, and he then became the willing and obedient channel for God's miraculous, restorative power. This vividly highlights the vital role that godly spiritual leaders, compassionate intercessors, and faith-filled individuals can play within any community of believers. Those who are willing to stand in the gap to faithfully bring the needs, hurts, and anxieties of the people before the throne of grace, and through whom God often chooses to minister His healing, His provision, and His transformative power. It is crucial to remember, however, as Elisha's own humble demeanor consistently demonstrated, that he did not perform this miracle by his own inherent strength or spiritual prowess. He was merely a conduit, an instrument in the hands of the Almighty. This serves as a deeply humbling and essential reminder for anyone who finds themselves in a position of spiritual leadership or influence. True, lasting spiritual power comes from God alone, and the primary role of the leader is to be a faithful, humble, and obedient servant, always pointing others not to themselves, but to the ultimate source of all goodness and power. The sheer, uncontainable joy experienced by the man who recovered the axe head is a beautiful and poignant picture of the profound joy that always accompanies divine restoration. Try to imagine, for a moment, the immense relief that floods his weary soul, the overwhelming gratitude that wells up from the depths of his heart, likely spilling over in tears and perhaps even joyful shouts of praise. It is the exquisite joy of a heavy, crushing burden suddenly lifted, the indescribable joy of a seemingly hopeless situation miraculously and definitively resolved. This resonates deeply with the even more profound spiritual joy we experience when God, in His mercy, restores something precious in our own lives that we thought was lost forever. Perhaps our precious sense of His tangible presence after a long, desolate period of spiritual dryness, or a fractured relationship that is lovingly mended and reconciled, or a lost sense of purpose and meaning that is wonderfully rediscovered. God is, in His very essence, a God of restoration, a God who delights in mending what is broken, healing what is hurt, and bringing forth beauty from ashes. His ultimate desire is to bring complete healing, lasting wholeness, and abundant joy to all His children. The vivid image of the heavy iron axe head, once irretrievably sunk in the dark, murky depths of the Jordan, now resting securely and reassuringly in the man's grateful hand, serves as a powerful and enduring metaphor for this ongoing, transformative, divine work of recovery, redemption, and renewal in all our lives. The lasting impact of this remarkable event on the entire community of the sons of the prophets would undoubtedly be profound and indelible. It would not just become a curious anecdote to be recounted around future campfires, but rather a foundational, character-shaping experience that would significantly deepen their understanding of God's nature and cement their trust in Elisha's divinely appointed leadership. It would serve as an unforgettable reminder that their God is not some distant, abstract theological concept confined to ancient scrolls or sacred rituals, but a living, breathing, active presence in their very midst, intimately involved in the minute details of their lives, capable of intervening in the most surprising, compassionate, and personal ways. This shared, sacred memory would become a precious part of their collective spiritual heritage, a story to be faithfully recounted to succeeding generations of prophets, a luminous and enduring testament to the God who can make heavy iron swim, and who cares with an infinite tenderness for even the smallest, most mundane concerns of His beloved people. As you deeply contemplate this extraordinary scene, the impossibly floating axe head, the astonished prophet receiving it back with trembling hands, the awestruck community erupting in praise, your own heart is filled with a profound sense of wonder, gratitude, and quiet reassurance. It is, by some standards, a quiet miracle, yes, perhaps lacking the overt dramatic flair and epic scale of some of Elisha's other recorded exploits, but its very quietness, its intimate focus, its tender attention to a single individual's practical need and emotional distress, makes it all the more profound, all the more deeply comforting. It assures you, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that the God of the entire universe, the architect of galaxies, the sustainer of all life, is also the God who notices a borrowed iron axe head lying unseen at the bottom of a muddy river. And more importantly, He is a God who cares enough, who loves enough, to intervene, to restore, to bring hope out of despair. He is a God of infinite, unimaginable power, yet also a God of infinite, unimaginable tenderness. And that, you reflect with a deep sigh of peace, is a truth worth cherishing, a truth worth holding onto with all your heart, a truth that can bring profound and lasting peace, unshakable hope, and quiet courage to your own soul, no matter what losses, anxieties, or seemingly insurmountable challenges you may be facing in your own life's journey. The iron did indeed swim, and in that simple, astonishing, historical fact, the boundless love, the meticulous care, and the limitless power of God are beautifully, unforgettably, and everlastingly revealed. The recovered axe head, still faintly cool and damp from its unexpected sojourn in the Jordan's embrace, now rests securely, almost reverently, in the hand of the profoundly grateful prophet. The palpable tension that had, only moments before, held the small community by the riverbank in its icy grip has completely dissolved. Like morning mist under the warmth of the rising sun, it has been replaced by an atmosphere suffused with a quiet, almost breathless awe, a profound sense of relief, and a gentle, burgeoning jubilation that expresses itself not in loud clamor, but in shared glances of wonder and whispered words of praise. The rhythmic sounds of purposeful industry, the steady chopping of wood, the careful shaping of beams for their new dwelling will soon resume, you sense. But from this moment forward, that labor will be subtly, yet profoundly different. It will be infused with a fresh, invigorating awareness of God's immediate, tangible presence, and a deeply comforting assurance of His tender, meticulously personal care. You find yourself lingering in this sacred afterglow, this holy quietude, allowing the deeper, multifaceted meanings of this seemingly simple, almost rustic story to settle gently into the deepest recesses of your heart, like fine, precious gold dust settling after a moment of profound, earth-shattering, yet whisper-soft revelation. This gentle, unassuming miracle, the story of Elisha's floating axe head, though it may occupy only a few brief verses in the vast, epic tapestry of Holy Scripture, offers a treasure trove of enduring wisdom, profound comfort, and quiet strength that extends far beyond its immediate historical and cultural context. It speaks with a soft, insistent voice directly to your own life, your own experiences of loss, your own unspoken longings for restoration and renewal. As you allow your mind to drift and reflect more deeply on this calm, curious, and ultimately comforting story of lost and found tools, you begin to perceive it as something far more significant than merely an ancient account of a physical object being miraculously recovered from a watery grave. It blossoms in your understanding, transforming into a luminous and tender metaphor, a gentle, unfolding parable that beautifully illustrates God's profound, unwavering concern for all that is lost, broken, or submerged in the often turbulent waters of our lives. And it speaks with equal clarity of His wondrous, often surprising, and always compassionate capacity to restore, to heal, and to make all things new. Take a prolonged, quiet moment now, dear friend, to consider the things that you, yourself, may have lost along your journey, or feel that you have lost. Perhaps it is not a literal iron axe head, heavy and cold, sunk beyond reach in a flowing river. Perhaps your losses are of a different nature, less tangible to the outward eye, yet equally, if not more, precious to your soul. Imagine for a moment that what you feel you have lost is your sense of purpose, that vital, internal compass that once gave clear direction, vibrant meaning, and joyful impetus to your days. Like the prophet's axe head, it may have slipped away from you unexpectedly, perhaps during a period of significant life transition, a change of career, the end of a relationship, the departure of children from home, or it might have been gradually submerged by the weight of repeated disappointments, by the slow erosion of unfulfilled dreams, or simply through the monotonous grind of daily routine, leaving you feeling adrift in a sea of uncertainty, ineffective in your endeavors, unsure of how to contribute meaningfully to the world around you, or even to your own sense of well-being. You may look at the tasks before you, the metaphorical trees that you are called to shape and build with, and feel utterly unequipped, your hands holding merely the empty handle of good intentions, lacking the sharp cutting edge of a clear and compelling purpose. This ancient story, whispered across the centuries, comes to you now as a soft, reassuring message of hope. God, your loving Creator, knows precisely where your sense of purpose has fallen. He sees your deep, often unspoken, longing to be effective, to contribute, to live a life that resonates with meaning, and He is abundantly able, in His perfect timing and in His infinitely wise way, to restore it, to cause it to swim again, to rise gently and surely to the surface of your conscious awareness. Perhaps He will do so through a quiet, internal prompting, a sudden insight during a moment of prayer or meditation, or it might come through a new, unexpected opportunity that aligns perfectly with your latent gifts, or perhaps it will be a renewed sense of calling, a fresh understanding of how your unique story fits into His grand, overarching plan. He may even use an Elisha figure in your life, a wise mentor, a compassionate friend, a trusted spiritual guide to help you see where to look, what stick of faith, courage, or action you need to cast into the waters of your current uncertainty. Be open, be patient, be watchful, or perhaps, dear friend, the precious thing you feel you have lost is your joy, that bright, buoyant, effervescent quality of spirit that once made your heart feel light. Your burdens seem less oppressive, and your path, even when challenging, feel illuminated from within. It may have become submerged over time by a prolonged season of sorrow, by the relentless, often overwhelming, pressures and demands of modern life, by a particularly painful disappointment that left a deep scar, or by an extended period of physical or emotional struggle that drained your reserves. You remember, perhaps with a touch of wistful longing, what it felt like to possess that vibrant joy, that spiritual cutting edge that brought a sense of delight to your experience of life, your relationships, and your walk with God. But now, it seems irretrievably sunk, leaving your days feeling heavy, monochrome, laborious, a trudging endurance rather than a grace-filled dance. The story of the floating axe head comes to you tonight as a gentle, comforting reassurance. Your Heavenly Father cares deeply about your joy. He who designed the intricate beauty of a butterfly's wing, who painted the breathtaking colors of a sunset, who orchestrated the delightful symphony of birdsong at dawn, who filled the world with opportunities for laughter and delight, does not desire His beloved children to live in a perpetual state of gloom or resigned heaviness. He knows the exact spot, the precise moment, the specific circumstances under which your joy was lost or submerged, and He possesses both the power and the tender willingness to restore it, to bring it floating gently back to the surface of your experience, often in the most unexpected and delightful ways. It might be rekindled through a fresh appreciation of the simple beauties of creation that surround you, through the unexpected kindness of a stranger or the loving embrace of a friend, through a moment of profound grace experienced in prayer or worship, or through a fresh, transformative encounter with His unconditional love for you. The stick that He uses to bring forth this restoration might be a simple, conscious act of gratitude on your part, a deliberate choice to focus on His goodness even amidst difficulties, a moment of quiet contemplation in nature, or the rediscovery of a passion or talent that brings you deep fulfillment. Consider, too, the possibility of a lost, or at least severely weakened, faith, that vital, foundational connection to the divine that undergirds all true peace and security. There are seasons in our spiritual journey, as many saints and mystics throughout history have attested, when our faith, which once felt so robust, so sharp and effective, can become dulled by doubt, tarnished by disillusionment, or simply feel as if it has slipped away from us entirely. Lost in the murky, turbulent waters of unanswered questions, painful experiences, or profound spiritual weariness, we may feel like the prophet holding the useless wooden handle, unable to make a discernible spiritual impact on ourselves or others, unable to connect with God with the same intimacy and confidence we once knew. The poignant cry, "Alas, Master, for it was borrowed, can resonate with a particular depth in this context, for faith, in its purest form, is indeed a precious gift from God, entrusted to us, and its perceived loss or diminishment can bring a unique and profound distress. This ancient story, however, offers immense comfort and boundless hope even here. You will recall that Elisha did not berate or condemn the man for his loss, nor did he dismiss his distress. He simply and compassionately asked, "Where did it fall?" God, in His infinite mercy, meets us precisely where we are, even in our moments of deepest spiritual desolation or doubt. He does not condemn our honest questions or our human struggles with belief. Instead, He gently invites us to show Him the place of our loss, to be utterly honest with Him and with ourselves about our true spiritual condition. And He alone, is the one who can ultimately restore that lost or weakened faith, who can cause that heavy, sunken iron of belief and trust to rise again, renewed, vibrant, and perhaps even stronger and more resilient for having passed through the waters of testing. The stick that He uses in this process of restoration might be His living word, the Scriptures, speaking afresh to our hearts with newfound power and relevance. It might be the steadfast love and unwavering faith of a supportive Christian community, the patient guidance of a spiritual director, or a moment of profound, unexpected grace in quiet prayer, where His presence is made undeniably real once more, dispelling the shadows of doubt with the light of His love. The story also speaks with a quiet eloquence about God's tender care for all the borrowed things in our lives. The man's distress, you will remember, was significantly magnified by the fact that the axe he had lost was not his own possession. It had been entrusted to him. As you reflect on this, you may realize how many things in your own life are, in a profound spiritual sense, borrowed from God. Your time on this earth, your unique talents and abilities, your material resources, your relationships, your physical health, your very life breath, are these not all precious gifts entrusted to you by a generous Creator for a specific season, to be used wisely, gratefully, and for His purposes and glory? When we feel we have squandered these sacred gifts, or lost them through our own neglect, poor choices, or unfortunate circumstances beyond our control, the sense of failure, of having been a poor steward, can be acute and deeply painful. This gentle miracle by the Jordan reminds us that God understands the weight of our stewardship, our sense of responsibility, and the anxieties that can accompany them. His boundless grace is not only sufficient to forgive our failures and shortcomings in stewardship, but also powerful enough to restore what has been lost, often in ways that lovingly reaffirm His ultimate ownership of all things. And our privileged role as dependent, yet deeply valued, co-workers and stewards in His kingdom. He doesn't just restore the tool, He often restores, in the process, our ability to serve Him with renewed joy, our sense of worthiness in His service, and our confidence in His unfailing provision. Elisha, in this poignant narrative, serves as a remarkably beautiful and insightful type, or foreshadowing, of the Lord Jesus Christ. Just as Elisha was physically present with his people in their labor, deeply compassionate towards them in their distress, and powerfully effective in bringing about their restoration, so too is Jesus Christ with us today. He is Immanuel, God with us, not a distant spectator, but an active participant in the joys and sorrows of our human experience. He is the one who, when we cry out in our losses, our fears, our brokenness, does not turn away in disdain or impatience, but draws near with arms of tender, unwavering compassion. He is the one who, with infinite gentleness, asks, "Where does it hurt? Show me the place of your loss, your pain, your deepest need." And He is the one who possesses all authority in heaven and on earth, all power to restore what is broken, to find what is lost, to heal what is wounded, and to make gloriously new what has grown old, weary, or ineffective in our lives. The simple stick that Elisha cut and cast into the water, some commentators and theologians throughout Christian history have seen in it a profound symbol of the cross of Christ. The cross, an instrument of shame, suffering, and death, became, through the paradoxical wisdom and power of God, the very means of abundant life, the pathway by which lost and broken humanity, sunk in the depths of sin and painful separation from God, could be lifted up, redeemed, reconciled. and lovingly restored to intimate fellowship with him. Just as the humble wood was the means of bringing forth the sunken iron from the depths of the Jordan, so the wood of the cross, stained with the precious blood of Christ, is the means of bringing forth forgiveness, healing, and eternal life for all who turn to him in faith. This profound connection adds yet another layer of inexhaustible depth and radiant comfort to this ancient story, linking it directly and powerfully to the very heart of the gospel message of hope and redemption. The lasting impact of this seemingly small, almost private miracle on the close-knit community of the sons of the prophets would undoubtedly have been immense and far-reaching. It wasn't merely about the practical benefit of a recovered tool, important as that was. It was about a significantly renewed and fortified faith. It was about a profoundly deepened trust in God's intimate, moment-by-moment involvement in the details of their lives. It was about an overwhelming, experiential sense of being seen, known, understood, and cherished by the Almighty Creator of the universe. Such shared experiences of God's direct intervention and tender care forge unbreakable bonds of love and unity within a spiritual community. They lay a solid foundation of collective testimony and shared memory that can sustain and encourage its members through all the inevitable future trials, challenges, and uncertainties that life may bring. Every time those prophets looked at their newly constructed dwelling place, built with beams that had been shaped and fitted with the help of that miraculously restored axe, they would remember. They would remember the sharp cry of distress, the prophet's despair, the calm presence of Elisha, the impossible sight of iron floating on water, and above all, they would remember that their God is a God who notices the smallest details, a God who cares with an infinite tenderness, and a God who acts with sovereign power on behalf of his children. This precious story, faithfully passed down through countless generations, would continue to ignite faith, inspire hope, and comfort troubled hearts. And so it does, even for you and for me today. Thousands of years removed from that sun-drenched riverbank, it serves as a poignant reminder that our own small stories of God's faithfulness, his provision, his gentle interventions in our individual lives are not insignificant or merely personal. They are vital threads in the grand, magnificent, ongoing tapestry of his redemptive work in the world, testimonies to his enduring love and power. You might also reflect, as you drift towards sleep, on the profound importance of acknowledging our need, of embracing our vulnerability. The prophet who lost the axe didn't attempt to hide his mistake out of pride, nor did he try to suffer his anxiety in stoic silence. He cried out, honestly and openly, "Alas, Master!" For it was borrowed. This courageous act of vulnerability, this humble admission of his need and his helplessness, was the crucial first step that swung wide the door for the miracle to enter. How often, perhaps, do we try to conceal our own losses, our failures, our deep-seated anxieties, maybe out of a fear of judgment, a desire to maintain an image of strength and self-sufficiency, or simply because we don't want to be a burden to others? This gentle story tenderly encourages us to bring our needs, our lost axe heads, our broken pieces, to God in prayer, and also, when appropriate, to trusted spiritual guides, compassionate friends, or supportive faith communities. It is often in our unreserved acknowledgement of our own helplessness, our letting go of self-reliance, that we create the space for God's powerful help to flow into our lives. It is in our embraced vulnerability that his strength is most often made perfect, his grace most gloriously displayed. Furthermore, this narrative beautifully underscores the enduring truth that God's methods for solving our problems and meeting our needs are often wonderfully surprising, delightfully unconventional, and frequently far beyond the scope of our limited human comprehension or expectation. Throwing an ordinary stick into the water to make a heavy iron axe head float, it defies all human logic, all scientific understanding. Yet, it was God's chosen method in that moment, for that man, in that place. This challenges us, in the gentlest way, to release our rigid, preconceived notions about how God should work, how he ought to solve our problems or answer our prayers. He is infinitely creative, his wisdom is unsearchable, and his ways are consistently higher and more wonderful than our ways. Our part is not necessarily to understand his methods fully, for they may often remain a mystery to us. Our part is to cultivate a heart that trusts His unfailing love, a will that is ready to obey His quiet promptings even when they seem strange or counterintuitive, and a spirit that remains open and expectant for His miracles, in whatever beautiful and unexpected form they may take. Sometimes the stick that He asks us to cast into the waters of our difficulty might be a courageous act of forgiveness extended to someone who has hurt us. It might be a step of blind faith taken into an unknown future. It might be a simple, heartfelt prayer of surrender, a conscious letting go of our need to control. Or it might be a small, seemingly insignificant act of kindness or service offered to another. It may appear small in our eyes, but in God's hands, empowered by His Spirit, it can become the unlikely catalyst for profound healing, astonishing restoration, and unimaginable blessing. This calm, curious, and deeply comforting story of a floating axe head is, in its very essence, a tenderly penned love letter from God to your soul, assuring you, beyond all doubt, of His meticulous, unwavering attention to every single detail of your life. It reminds you, as you prepare to surrender to the embrace of sleep, that He is not some distant, aloof, uncaring cosmic deity, too grand to be bothered with the minutiae of human existence. No, He is a loving, relational Father who walks beside you on your journey, who weeps with you in your losses and disappointments, and who rejoices with an unparalleled joy to restore your soul, to heal your heart, and to bring you into the fullness of His purpose for your life. He is the God of infinite second chances, the God who can miraculously recover what seems irretrievably lost, the God who can make even the heaviest burdens of your heart feel remarkably lighter, as if they too could float effortlessly upon the boundless, buoyant waters of His amazing grace. As the gentle narrative of Elisha and the floating axe head draws to its peaceful close, you are left with a profound, pervasive sense of tranquility and deep reassurance. The image of the thankful prophet, his precious borrowed axe now miraculously restored, ready to rejoin his hopeful brothers in their sacred, communal work of building, is a powerful and enduring image of hope renewed, purpose re-established, and grace received. The ancient Jordan River flows onward, as it has for millennia, but it now carries within its currents a new story, a fresh testament to God's astonishing power and His inexhaustible love. And you, dear friend, now carry this precious story within your own heart as you prepare for a night of peaceful, restorative rest. Let it be a gentle, persistent reminder to you that no matter what you may feel you have lost, no matter how deep or dark the waters of your despair may currently seem, the God of Elisha, the God who made iron swim, is your God too. He knows precisely where your axe head fell. He cares with an intensity that surpasses all human understanding, and He is abundantly able and profoundly willing to restore, to heal, to renew. Let the gentle, soothing rhythm of this ancient, sacred story lull you into a deep and peaceful sleep. Let the unshakable assurance of God's constant, attentive care be a comforting, protective blanket wrapped securely round you. May you dream tonight of rivers of grace, of burdens effortlessly lifted, of lost things wonderfully and unexpectedly found. And may you awaken in the morning light with a spirit refreshed, a heart renewed, and a quiet, unshakable confidence that comes from knowing such a wondrous, compassionate, and all-powerful God. He is ever faithful. His mercies, as the prophet Jeremiah declared, are new every single morning, and His divine power to restore, to redeem, and to make all things new is utterly limitless. Rest now, dear one, rest deeply in His profound peace, in His unconditional love, in the gentle, all-encompassing embrace of His never-failing, ever-present grace. The story of Elisha's floating axe head is like a quiet, tender whisper from God directly to your heart tonight, a sweet and timely reminder that even in the smallest, most seemingly insignificant details of your life, He is there, actively, lovingly, and wisely working all things together for your ultimate good, because you love Him, and because you are called according to His glorious and eternal purpose. May your sleep be deep and untroubled. May your dreams be sweet and filled with light. And may your heart be garrisoned with that quiet, steadfast confidence that comes only from knowing, loving, and trusting such a wondrous, compassionate, and all-powerful God. Amen.